Good morning, everybody. I am Wendy Nystrom, your host for Environmental Social Justice. This is our very first webcast of the year 2023, and I have the amazing Diamond Spratling, who is the founder of Girl Plus Environment, back again. So welcome back, Diamond.
Thank you so much for having me at the start of the new year.
Absolutely. I couldn't think of anyone else I wanted. I mean, it's the 3rd of January, and I'm like, could you please be my first person?
Oh, I appreciate that.
Of course. Now, aside from the work you're doing, Girl Plus Environment, which I absolutely love,
Yes,
you went to the COP27 in Egypt.
I
You were
did.
invited.
Yes, still very surreal.
And I would like to do a quick recap of COP and what your opinion was with one, why did you attend? How did you get that invitation?
Yeah, so I actually had the privilege to attend COP because I was a part of the Climate Generation delegation. So I had to apply for it and then do an interview, and then I ended up being selected as one of the 12 delegates. So I got to attend week 2, which was really exciting and such a privilege to even be in that space.
I think that's great. And you are actually busting your butt to get these grants and to get, attention and to speak at events. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between, Diamond is doing so much work with Girl Plus Environment. Please check her out. You're amazing. I mean, you're really lifting voices of Black and brown girls around the world, and you will be international very soon. But from COP, what was your primary takeaway that you learned from this meeting?
Yeah, so there were tons of takeaways, and I've documented a lot of just like general reflections. But I think the biggest thing that I took away was the power really is within the people. And I mean, I feel like that probably sounds so cheesy, but it honestly is because I mean, going into COP, I was super optimistic. I was like, we're going to have the world leaders making right decisions for the people, for the world. And then I got there and it didn't feel like that at all from our world leaders. Essentially it felt like two different conferences, one where the negotiations were, and then one where the people in the public convened. And so it was discouraging for me at first. But what I really learned was that the power really is within the people. And it's going to take all of us from a global scale, from a global level, to really take matters into our own hands, because essentially, I don't feel like we can depend on our world leaders to make decisions about us, because essentially they were making those without us. We weren't in those spaces, we weren't in those rooms. And so it was really unfair to think that we were going to come out with these decisions that were really equitable and really prioritize people in our planet. So really, I just took away just being in that space full of people who essentially all cared about climate as much as I did, and were trying to build this community and this coalition from the ground up. So I felt like that was probably the biggest thing that I could have taken away from being in a space like that.
You hit on something extremely important. There was a viral photo of the leaders of COP, and it was all men. And the leaders that are really making change are primarily men and women of color, women, people at the grassroots level that are actually affecting change. And this is my personal belief, so, feel free to agree with me or disagree with me. But I think the second that ESG came into play and money came into play and people could profit from it, everything shifted and we got shoved out, and these guys kind of took over because they saw money.
Yep.
And I think we've lost our vision.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I remember that photo going viral as well too. And as a Black woman, it was really triggering. And it didn't feel like I was looking at a photo of world leaders who were committed to the environment and committed to the people and the planet. It didn't feel like that at all. And so I think that, I completely agree. It feels like a lot of people who were there for the wrong reasons. I mean, even Canada actually I think they had like 8 different delegates that were from the oil and gas industry, and they were like lobbying, like people were coming up, like I had people come up to me to talk to me about nuclear energy. I'm just like, what? It was just really crazy. And I think that people were more so looking at the environment and of this movement of more so from the profit of how they can profit from the movement. I mean, COP was funded primarily by Coca-Cola, for example. We saw
Oh,
Coke bottles everywhere, and it was such the biggest oxymoron I could have ever imagined.
were they plastic bottles?
They were glass.
Okay, a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit, but it's just like, hold on, are these your people? So,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, one of the comments, because I interviewed right before the end of the year, Dr.
mm,
Farouk Albaz, who attended
mm,
virtually.
yeah,
And he's been active in social justice, environmental justice, geology, everything. And one of the things, I mentioned to him was this is kind of turning into a networking event with expense accounts and big dinners and private jets. And he said, of course it is.
yeah,
And it has to be because we do need to bring those people to the table. We just can't let them be at the head of the table.
yeah.
And how do we initiate that change? That's
Yeah,
a big question. And I get that's a hard one.
we might be here forever. No, yeah, that's definitely a big question, and I saw the same thing. I mean, I think there was another photo went viral of all the private planes going
Yeah.
launching into Sharm, and that was absolutely outrageous. And I think it has essentially has turned into a show of like, oh, which countries can look the best, or how can we up this other country or this other group, and it's turned into a competition, but
Yeah.
I think it hasn't always been, in a rewarding way. And so I think what actions we can take is again taking this action from the ground up approach and really honing in on this concept of community and a coalition building, especially on a global level. I mean, that was the first time I had ever been in a room full of so many people who were like all cared about climate. I'm like, wait, you all care about the same thing as me, so it was really amusing to see that and to be in a space full of people who are trying, or for the most part, I'm speaking of the public, the civil society,
Yeah.
not the world leaders and the lobbyists, but civil society all being in that space. And so I think the action that we can take is going back to our communities and doing this work from the ground up. I mean, it was a point where I felt very discouraged during the session, but luckily I attended the very first climate justice pavilion, which was amazing to see. And there was a group of Black women who were on the panel who advised me, this is the time that we stand up. This is the time where we go back to our communities and we fight like we never have, because that's who we can depend on, our communities and our organizations doing the great work. And so that's what I have been advising folks to do, and that's what I've been doing since getting back to Atlanta, is to take what I've learned and to really use that towards the actionable work that we're doing on the ground.
That's amazing. I mean, as I've been saying over and every little bit helps.
Yep.
Little change has a big effect.
Yep.
And what you're doing is you're kind of snowballing that effect of talking to people, and you actually gather people together
Yep.
and you force that change. One of the things from COP that I learned only after it was over was there was a lot of discussion of how Western civilization contaminated developing countries with our air pollution. And yet we went into Egypt saying, oh, you can't use any coal or oil, you have to do all renewable energies because we screwed everything up. And their response was, are you kidding me?
Mm.
We don't have the resources to do this. There are many African countries that don't have the resources to do that. So they're like, we have to use these polluting technologies. And from a social justice, environmental justice, also a climate issue and pollution issue, I would love to hear your opinion on how we as Western countries, developed countries, are responsible and need to take accountability for our actions for the last 100 years
Yeah.
of doing this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have tons to say on this, but I'll keep it brief. But yeah, I mean, when you go back and you look at how COP ever started or why, what was the meaning for it, it was so that there was primarily focus on the Western countries to take leadership and to take action in actually dismantling environmental outcomes and in issues that we've seen, so that they can support other countries who were not able to do so. So that goes into this entire concept of equity. We're not going to get to this 1.5% that everyone keeps talking about if we're thinking, oh, well, we should be thinking equality. It's not an equality thing, because some countries can't do what others are privileged to be able to do. And so we have to come at it from an equitable stance. And I think one of the other things that we talked a lot about at COP was this concept of loss and damage and climate reparations. And basically that means that communities and countries who have the financial means and who have traditionally damaged those communities or countries will actually pay and provide funding for low income countries and countries or communities who are suffering most disproportionately by climate change. And that is something that I know a lot of people have in the past been very skeptical about. Well, oh, well, we're just giving funding, but funding goes a long way, but also support as well for those communities and providing guidance. And so loss and damage ended up getting funded at COP, which was a huge win for many people. There were amazing indigenous communities there who were very happy that we had the passing of loss and damage. But I think ultimately I'm really invested in seeing this work follow through, because I think we say a lot of things at these big conferences, but then when it comes down to doing something, there's very little that we see get done.
There is a lot of talk and there's not a whole lot of action because it's hard.
Yep.
Change is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about getting rid of plastic, and everything we buy is still wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
Everything is still shipped in plastic. It's really hard to get away. I mean, I'm not talking about hard plastics that your phones are made of, your computers are made of. I'm talking, do we need to wrap our bananas in a plastic bag? No.
Yeah.
And it's these little changes that we just need to consciously make. And with respect to the work you're doing, raising up voices and letting people be heard and understood where they're coming from is the most important thing we have out there. Just so we close out, how can people find you and donate? She's a 501c3, folks. Donate. Get her out there.
Yeah, so feel free to follow us at Girl Plus Environment. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, and then our website is girlplusenvironment.org. And feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn at Diamond Spratling. And yeah, please donate to us. We have tons of amazing projects and programs that we're doing and trying to amplify the voices of Black and Brown women across the U.S., especially as it relates to environmental justice and racial equity. So feel free to visit our website where you can find our donation link.
Excellent. Guys, donate. Write off those taxes. So, all right, guys, I am Wendy Nystrom, your host with Environmental Social Justice with the amazing Diamond Spratling. Look her up, check her out, connect with her on LinkedIn. She's amazing. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great new year.
Thanks.